So without further ado, can I just welcome Hugh Davis? Thank you so much. Chief Executive of BASE, British Association of Supported Employment, who's going to speak to us today and just give us a really good flavour, perhaps, of where we're at on this agenda. Thanks, Hugh. Over to you.
Thank you, Alice. I haven't got a presentation. I'm winging it a little bit, but I've been in this business for 30 years now with supported employment, so I should know a little bit by now. Hopefully it comes together. Firstly, a bit of introduction about BASE and what BASE is. We're effectively a collective of employment support services and provision. There's been a national association in one guise or another, probably for about 30 years, possibly more. And the idea is really that we're stronger together and we can have some influence and voice by working together. So BASE involves people who manage and have delivered employment support through all sorts of provision. And we're there to represent the sector. We're there to try and influence policy and funding decisions across government. And we're there increasingly to try to professionalise this sector so that we provide good quality support to young people, and with the aim of improving employment rates for people with disabilities. We've got about 200 plus members, I think 230 member organisations across public, private, voluntary sector. Includes a good many local authorities, about 70 local authorities, quite a few colleges, some schools. So it's a pretty broad church, a spectrum of interests, but we do have good involvement with Department for Work and Pensions and Department for Education, and we're trying to make it easier for you guys to get on with the job that you're doing. And firstly, I want to thank you for everything you're doing in your organisations. It's been a heck of a couple of years, and particularly where you guys have been going out trying to find placements, work placements, engage with employers who've got a whole range of issues themselves to address at the moment. I think we recognise how difficult it has been over the last couple of years. There has been a huge amount of innovation and creativity shown by organisations and individual staff, and that is noticed and very much appreciated. So why do we do what we do? What is this all about? I first got involved with disability 40 years ago. And it was around largely resettling people from long stay hospitals. Because back in the 1980s, the experience of most people was that they didn't see somebody with a learning disability at work. They barely saw them in their community. There was a huge program to close down the long stay hospitals, but it's still really very recent, this change. And I do worry that perhaps we might go back to the old days and specialist centres, because that might be a bit cheaper and a bit more efficient. And we see some of this with Winterbourne and all the other scandals that have been around. And I think employment is the single biggest thing we can do to change people's lives, to change their families' lives, to make sure that people are rooted in their communities. For those of you with really long memories, you might remember something called the 5 accomplishments, John O'Brien. It was about giving people skills, about choice, about them having a positive reputation and value in their communities, about being a part of those communities. And to me, employment is that key change agent that changes people's lives, because it gives us structure in our lives. It gives us a range of friendships, connections. It gives us stimulation, satisfaction. It gives us money in our pocket so that we can make choices, and so that we can look at, I guess, some of the leisure activities that enrich our lives. And that, to me, is perhaps what attracted me to work around supporting people to get into paid work. Supported employment is different, I think, to the rest of the sort of welfare to work sector, because we're underpinned by a set of principles and values which are built around all of these things. They're built about recognizing choice and control. They're built around, as well, recognizing that employers have got their own needs that we have to address, to understand and to meet. We have two customer bases. We have the job seeker, the young person with a disability, but we also have the employer to bear in mind with all of this. It's timely, this focus. The UK economy is going through huge changes, not just with COVID. We're seeing a lot of people coming through COVID and saying, right, maybe early retirement for me. There are certainly skill shortages as a result of Brexit. Employers are looking ahead to see where can I get staff from in 4 years' time, 5 years' time. What is that pipeline for recruitment? And you are firmly part of that pipeline. Employers are looking wider and they're having to look more long term about how they're going to make sure that their business is sustainable and successful. I think we also have to look at the huge costs that are involved in supporting somebody with a disability for a lifetime where they're not working, where they are dependent on services. And there's no doubt that if we can demonstrate to commissioners, to local authorities, that somebody becoming independent, living independently, working, it is going to free up resources at a local level. And that is something we can't get away from. The current situation, we've been collecting data on employment rates for people with learning disabilities who are known to social care. It's called the ASCOF indicator, Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework. I'm not particularly keen on the indicator. I think there are faults with it. I don't think it's particularly reliable. I think it's very difficult to reliably compare your local authority with another local authority using those figures. But it does give us a general picture, and it's all we've got at the moment, so it's quite influential in terms of policy discussions. The employment rate currently stands at 5.1%. Now that's as low as it's been for many a year, and it's worrying to see that employment rate is generally on a trend downwards rather than upwards. And when we look behind that figure, there's a couple of things that stand out. One is that the situation for women is much worse than for men. Secondly, that most people are probably working less than 16 hours a week. They're still on benefits and they're working through permitted work. And I think that's just something to bear in mind when we look at employment rates. For those that haven't seen them, Yorkshire and Humber, you're doing the best, 6% average. For men in the Yorkshire and Humber region with a learning disability, known to social care, the employment rate is 6.8%. For women, it's only 5%. So there's quite a differential there, and that's mirrored across most of the regions of England. In the Northwest, the employment rate is 4.5%, and in the Northeast, it's 4.3%. So below average. There's a bit of catching up needed. Bit of context around this, many local authorities either have an in-house supported employment service or there's voluntary sector organisations in their area providing support, often contracted through the local authority. The problem is that this provision is at risk. Local authority finances are getting tighter and tighter. They're getting to the point where they can only fund statutory requirements, the things they have to provide by law. Supported employment isn't one of those things. So it's at risk. We are seeing services cut, scaled down. It is a worry. So I think it makes it even more important that we do everything we can to make sure that young people coming through the system now avoid that cliff edge of leaving education with no promise of further support and nothing to do in their lives, and go into work. That's the brief, to make sure that young people coming through education end up with a job at the end of it. Because in my book, that's what education is for. It is to make well-rounded, mature people who can take advantage of adult life to the best. I guess I get a lot of phone calls from parents, particularly parents who've got a son or a daughter about the age of 25, 26, maybe a bit younger, who've left education, and they really don't know what to do. They're desperate for help. They're desperate for support. They're badly informed, actually, most of the time. Most have never heard of the local offer. They don't know what provision is available in their areas. They've generally not heard of the parent carer forums where they might be able to get some support in their area. So there's a huge amount of need out there, I think, for information. I hear the points I think Rabina made earlier about the need for support for families. And I remember going to meet families when I was doing direct job coaching. And I'd be lucky to get out of the house within 2 hours, because I knew for the first hour, the parents would want to tell me about what a tough time they'd had with social workers, with schools, with specialist support, and how are we going to be any different? So there's a sort of winning them over, getting them involved, getting them on side, getting the buy-in that I think is critical. And I've heard too often of young people going through an education system, going through an internship, being offered a job, only for the parents at the end to say, nah, it's not going to happen. We have to get them on board early. There is no reason, I believe, why parents can't have some idea of what's going to come up when their son or daughter is about 6 or 7 years old. That's when we should be having those discussions about longer term ambitions and getting their support and their buy-in to this. Some interesting slides come up. I love the one about increasing aspirations. That's a regular, isn't it? You think we'd be getting a bit further with that by now, but it does feel like there's change in the air. I have been reliably informed there's a feature on disability employment on today, 1 o'clock news on BBC, disability employment. It's repeated at 6 o'clock. I think things like that are what change opinions, what change minds. A bit of context. We're awaiting the SEND review. It's been a long time coming. There's been many conversations, and I'm conscious that many of the people on this session have been involved in those discussions as well. We're expecting it next month, but we have seen the levelling up commitments, a whole range of announcements across the board, a lot around education. I think they're called investment areas. There's certain areas that have been highlighted for particular targeted action. We are going to see £18 million over 3 years for to double the capacity for supported internships. That is very welcome. And I think we'll have to wait for the SEND review to see the detail and the particular support measures that are put in place to make sure that happens. We have just had revised guidance from the Department for Education. That's very welcome. A number of us have been probably involved in advising on that and producing that since about August, I would guess. So good to see it's out. I think it is a great improvement on the previous guidance. It is a bit tighter, a bit more ambitious, a bit more specific. So very much welcome that. One of the things I find is that people in education often have that real focus on what's happening in that sector, but perhaps have less of a focus about what's happening across other policy areas. So I thought just for a minute or two, talk about the wider policy context, particularly around support for adults. We have a number of welfare to work programmes that the government funds through the Department for Work and Pensions. The biggest of them is the Work and Health programme. That has just been extended. Its focus is meant to be people with disabilities and long-term health conditions. It's also widened to people who are long-term unemployed. We've also got a programme which not that many people know about called IPES, Individual Personalised Employment Support. And that is meant to be aimed at people whose support needs are higher, who need more intensive, personalised approach. When I talked to Department for Work and Pensions officials when they were designing it, I heard the best description of supported employment ever from somebody at DWP. Just a shame it didn't get built into the design of this programme. It's delivered on a sort of regional basis, so there'll be one provider for the whole of the North East, one for the North West. I've not been able to find any statistics about it. I know it's just had an extra £10 million given to it by government to expand it, but there are no published statistics on job outcomes and numbers of people going onto it. So I've asked them to publish that, and we're expecting it soon. It'd be interesting to see how it's been performing. We've also got Restart and Kickstart, getting young people into paid opportunities. Most of these, well, we don't know how people with learning disabilities are getting on because they don't collect the data. We have no idea how many people with disabilities are on Kickstart. None at all. My personal opinion is that all of these programs are too light touch. They're not appropriate to meet the needs of the people who we are supporting. And if they do go on those programs, they end up getting parked, just left to one side, because it's not cost effective for the provider. I don't know if you've read the United Nations is a committee for the rights of people with disabilities. Article 27, which the UK government has signed up to, is all about the provision of support, training, employment, support for people with disabilities to make sure that people are integrated into their communities and the labour market. We were very concerned that the UK government wasn't fulfilling its responsibilities around this and argued for a separate programme for people with learning disabilities and autism. I'm pleased to say that it looks like we're starting out this year. We've got something that DWP is calling the Trailblazer, Supported Employment, the Trailblazer. It was confirmed in the National Disability Strategy and the DWP Green Paper, and it will result in government funding going to 20 local authorities across Britain over an 18-month project to support improved job outcomes. So that will go through local authorities. We expect some engagement either later this month or next month from government with local authorities. Letters will go to chief executives and directors of adult social care. And an expression of interest exercise will probably happen March, April, with go live in July. The aim of this is to try and get longer term, try and get £250,000 into every local authority to fund the bare bones of an employment support service. And I'll come back to why that's so important in a sec.
Just a couple more minutes, Hugh, and then maybe some questions.
Okay. You know, we've talked about this cliff edge at the age of 25. People have gone through 15 to 20 years of funded education by that point. It has to result in positive outcomes for young people. Otherwise, what's it all been about? So internships, I think, are a really good model of how we can exit from education and into employment. I don't think they're the silver bullet. They're not appropriate for everybody. And something that concerns me is about what happens to those people who do not get onto an internship. Are we writing them off at that point? What support are we going to provide for people on other study programs? We've got now 10, 11 years experience of delivering supported internships in this country. That's how long they've been around. We've seen a rapid expansion over recent years. But there are issues that are cropping up that we need to talk about. A lot of the staff delivering supported internships feel very isolated within their own organisations. we absolutely have to have senior management championing this provision. Outcomes are hugely variable. I have known I've personally had a college ring me up saying, can you help us? We've got a dozen people finishing their supported internship this year. Can you help them find jobs? So, you know, outcomes have varied from 0% to 95%. The high 90% getting a job. There must be something that's causing that. What is it that one provider can get 90% and another's barely getting less than 10% outcomes? Either way, we've got very little data on any of this. And if we're going to improve quality in the sector, it's got to be built on data, better quality data, what is actually happening. And it's not just about job outcomes, it's about job sustainability. I want to know how many of those people are still in a job 6 months later, because it does nobody any favors if they bounce out of work a few months later. There are a couple of things about the pathway I think we need to focus on. Pre-internship pathways have got to be good quality so that those going on to internships know what they want to do and have some experience of being in a workplace. You know, Gatsby benchmark stuff, engagement with local employers, understanding your local labour market. We need better quality, particularly around employer engagement. And I know Elaine's going to be talking about the quality assurance framework shortly. We need better information on the local offer. Many authorities, their local offer is just so difficult to navigate, and then tells you about organisations that are 200 miles away with very little on the local organisations. We've got to do better on working with families about the content on the local offer. There are issues around access to work and high needs funding, but we'll get there eventually on that one. They will be going digital over the next year or two with access to work. One of the big issues that concerns me is the post-internship support. What happens when somebody successfully completes an internship, gets a job? What do you do as providers? It was great knowing with you. Fantastic, you've got a job. Ta-ra! It's not good enough. There needs to be a handover because that employer is going to need continued support. It may be low level, it may be infrequent, but we know that without ongoing contact, little things escalate. And before you know it, the person's lost their job. So just for sake of a little bit of support, 2 minutes. So what do I want to see? Good quality pre-internship pathways built on Gatsby benchmarking, easy access and information about what's available in your area in terms of internships, traineeships, apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are a whole nother story. Making sure that on programme, on supported internships, at least 70% of the time is spent in the workplace, because it's about immersing yourself in work and understanding what that's about. Train job coaches. I've seen too many colleges tell their learning support assistants, you're a job coach on Monday. Not good enough. Yeah. It's a different job role. It needs training. And finally, a stronger role for SEND employment forums. Yeah. Some places still haven't got them. They have a key role in pulling the different providers together, sharing best practice, collating data, learning what works best and sharing that across different forums, and involving local employers in what's going on here. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see. Conscious of time, I could go on forever. Sorry, Alice.
Don't apologise, that's fantastic. Thank you, Hugh.